Takole, lep pozdrav vsem. Hello to everybody. I'm very glad that we have our dean with us, Dr. Mara Cotič. Veseli me, da je z nami pozdravljen na govoru naša dekanja Pedagoške fakultete Univerze na Primorskem, profesorica doktorica Mara Cotič. Dekanja, izvolite, beseda je vaša.
Hvala. Dober dan, spoštovane kolegice in kolegi. Vesela sem in seveda tudi počaščena, da vas lahko danes pozdravim v imenu Pedagoške fakultete Univerze na Primorskem na znanstvenem sestanku o zelo pomembni, zanimivi temi etika živali. Zahvaljujem se vam tudi, da ste se odzvali na povabilo dr. Tomaža Gumšovnika, našega prodekana za mednarodne odnose in umetnost. In ne dvomim, da boste s svojimi pogledi, s svojimi raziskavami in kritičnimi preseki doprinesli k še boljšemu razumevanju, poznavanju te teme etike o živalih. Želim vam uspešno delo. Prosim, Tomaž.
Hvala lepa, dekani. So short translation in English. The Dean is very happy that you all are attending this meeting that's dedicated to animal ethics and specifically to how we can educate, how we can include animal ethics into critical pedagogy. So, hvala lepa še enkrat, many thanks. And now, of course, I'll say a couple of things. Just in English, the meeting is in English, so I'll say a couple of things about this whole idea of organizing our workshop. Now, the main idea of the workshop is basically, on the first hand, to introduce critical animal pedagogy to a broader audience. And that's why we have quite a lot of students with us today. But on the other hand, we also want to provide a critical reflection on some current issues within this discipline. So it's split, as you were able to see. It's split in two parts. The first two are more introductory talks, and then the second two, the other two are more advanced, delving deeper into the problem of the issues of critical animal pedagogy. So what we have here today is cooperation between various universities. First of all, we are cooperating with University of Innsbruck, with Institute for Educational Science. And this is actually our second joint workshop. Allow me to share with you my screen just to show you that what was our first workshop about. It was about water epistemologies. You can Google this online and see the abstracts of the talks. Partially, it was, of course, also about animal ethics, and I think it was quite a successful event. And this is why we decided to have a second go at it with today's workshop. But also the other two institutions that are part are University of Maribor and University of Split from Croatia, but we also have some other guests here. For instance, I'm glad that Dr. Marietka Goleš-Kaučič was able to join us. She comes from Scientific and Research Institute from Slovenian Academy of Sciences and Arts. I think that also Valentina Hriber-Sorčan will be joining us from Faculty of Arts of Maribor. There are also some people from Zagreb that are collaborating. So basically what we are doing here is involuntarily, in a way, we are spreading this web of Alpine Adriatic web of critical animal studies and critical animal pedagogy scholars. So like a Middle European network of scholars that are working within the fields of critical animal studies and critical animal pedagogy. Now, maybe a couple of words about our schedule today. So first, we have an introductory talk by me that will basically be talking about some main ideologies that are operating within the field of critical animal pedagogy. And the schedule is such that around 20 to 25 minutes are planned for talks, and then we are also open for discussions and for any potential questions, so that, of course, if there will be any issues, we can debate them. Now, I'm also in the role of the moderator, so I'm admitting people at the same that are waiting in the waiting room and talking at the same time. So maybe sometimes I'll be a bit slow in talking if I'll have to resolve any technical issues. Okay, so first is me, then we have Branislava Vičar. Branislava Vičar comes from Faculty of Arts, University of Maribor. She's actually chair of the Slavistics department and Slovenistics department there. She is one of the first scholars in Slovenia working in the field and in the field of critical animal studies. And she'll be presenting to you a critical discourse analysis and reflecting on speciesism in advertising. I think she will also talk about insects, not only about food, so that her talk might be interesting for some advanced scholars in the field as well. Now, as you can see, in between talks, we have 5-minute breaks that you can use for various necessities. And after those 5 minutes breaks, we continue. Then we have a second part where we have more contemporary advancements within critical animal pedagogy. And the first one to present talk here will be my colleague Rana Rangat-Spanning from University of Innsbruck. She has a very rich bio in environmental education, also in youth education research, and of course in critical animal studies and critical animal pedagogy. And at least 80% of what I know from this field is actually due to me knowing Rana. So big thanks for her and for her support. And also to University of Innsbruck, I have to say, University of Innsbruck has a special seminar on human animal studies with wonderful people there. Gabriela Kompacher also. And I'm sure that some students from Innsbruck are also joining us now. So hi, everybody. Critical animal studies are really flourishing at the University of Innsbruck, and I'm very happy to be part of that. Then we have Josip Guč. Josip Guč is a young scholar from Croatia. He will present basically in Split. They also organize a very interesting event of which I partook this year. That's Days of Cultural Animalistics. Usually the event takes place in October, so in autumn. This year we had, or they had, the 4th edition, a really interesting conference as well. And I met Josip while he was delivering a talk at Branislava's event, and I immediately was interested in what he had to say. And also today, I think his talk is promising. It's about Paulo Freire and a rather underexplored, I would say, concept in Freire's pedagogy, and that is childlikeness. Usually Freire is seen as quite anthropocentric scholar, and this is also where many of CAS and CAP people criticize him. However, there are also plenty of areas to explore in Freire that are still useful for critical animal pedagogy, and one of them will be presented today by Josip Guc. So this is a short introduction to our schedule. If you have any technical questions, I'll be happy to answer them now. Maybe you can give me a hint if you can hear me well, if everything is okay. People are nodding, so thank you. Any questions, technical? No? So if not, then once again, I would like to let you know that this event is being recorded. And that the recording will be shared, probably also posted online on the YouTube channel of our faculty. So please bear this in mind. Okay, then if there are no more technical questions, just allow me to start with my introductory presentation, which is basically just introducing some of the main ideologies within the field that operate within the field: anthropocentrism, speciesism, and carnism. And then I'll also talk a little bit, I'll make a very broad, a very general introduction to critical animal pedagogy. And hopefully now you can see my PowerPoint presentation, right? Please, yeah. So I will just leave it like this and we'll just manually continue. Just let me check if you can see the next slide, because sometimes you can. Okay, thank you. So, okay, what are the main goals of my talk? Basically, first of all, I just, because some of you are new in the are new to the field, I just want to first show you some statistics about animal, let's call it use, or as you will quickly see, also abuse. So to see where we actually are, what our attitude towards animals is like. That's the first point. Then I'll talk about ideologies. I'll also define what ideology is, because there is a lot of confusion about this, this notion. And we'll see how they actually enable animal abuse. And then the third main part of the talk is trying to specify what the role of education is in promoting those ideologies. So education is not only a good thing, unfortunately. It can be wonderful, it can open our horizons, it can better our society. However, sometimes it can also do some bad stuff, basically indoctrinate us in certain worldviews, and we will see how animal abusing ideologies are actually taught in school. And from this, we'll make a transition and try to see how maybe we can change this and specify what the task of critical animal pedagogy is. So these are modest goals that I set for myself today. So let's go to the first one. Unbelievably, but there are more than 70 billion animals killed worldwide per year, only for food purposes. In this graph, you can see how this number is actually rising, especially for pigs over the past decades, and how also other numbers are increasing. And chickens or poultry is actually in thousands. And these are billions. So pigs stand at around 1.5 or even more billion individual animals slaughtered for food per year, and other animals follow suit, except that, of course, as said, chicken are way up here. Now, maybe I can, for those really who are new to this field, what I can show you is this animal kill counter, which is basically an algorithm that counts how many animals are killed in real time. Can you see the website now? Let me refresh it. So from the moment I refresh it, this is how many animals are being killed as we speak. So it's chickens already 20,000 in just a few seconds. So we are really slaughtering animals at an unbelievably fast rate. This is not only happening somewhere in the far countries, it's happening in our countries. I have here statistics from Slovenia, from Croatia, and from Austria. And you can see that in Slovenia, we have 2 million of people and we slaughter around 40 million chickens per year. And the numbers themselves, I think, are pretty telling. In Croatia, I think the situation is pretty similar. There are 4.5 million people in Croatia. It's pretty similar in Austria. What really stands out is the number of pigs being slaughtered. I think Austria has 7 to 8 million people, right? So only a twofold increase from Croatia, but Croatia has 1.7 million, and Slovenia has around 300,000 pigs. So this is still, I think this is something that stands out. So just to have a picture of how many animals are being slaughtered annually. Now, another really interesting and often used graph is the following, because people sometimes, we have this idea that, you know, mostly what we have are wild animals, and then we have humans, and then a little bit of livestock. But actually the real situation is exactly the opposite. If you count the body mass, the bodies, if you would weigh the bodies, it's unbelievable majority of animals that are alive is actually animals for food, livestock. And then humans and all of the other wild animals are just this tiny little fraction. So maybe this graph is also very graphic. All of the whales, the giraffes, the elephants, everything you put together, it's only this tiny little fraction of bodies. The vast majority is just livestock and cows and calves, pigs, and pets are just also a tiny little bit, and also humans are not negligible. So here we can see that this industry is really out of proportion, to say the least. Now, of course, this is animals raised for food are the biggest concern of animal ethics, but they are not the only concern. There are, of course, many other forms of animal abuse. Animal experimentation can be one of them. Then, of course, animals that are raised for fur, for a number of other products, but also something that's often neglected is animals that are raised as pets in puppy mills. So don't buy puppies, go and adopt one from a shelter, because this is a really big issue. Also in Slovenia, as you know, people are warning about this on the radio often, because it's a really serious problem. And then you have all sorts of other kinds of animal abuse, like animals that are bred for fights, animals in the zoos, or animals in animal shows. Now, often what people say is, yeah, but this animal abuse is taking place somewhere else. Our countries have legislation in place in order to prevent the gravest cases of animal abuse and so on. However, unfortunately, when you go on the terrain, you see that that's not the case. Here I have just 3 recent examples from Slovenia, from 3 different slaughterhouses where grave mishandling is present. And one of them surfaced just recently. I think that on Monday, there was another affair that sprang up. So those things aren't happening somewhere far away, but here at our doorstep. Now, the point of critical animal studies and critical animal pedagogy is the following. This abuse, the sheer extent of this abuse, would not be possible if there wouldn't be some ideologies. operating in the background that actually enable it. So what is an ideology? As said in the introduction, people often mistakenly think that ideology is waving with flags and singing, you know, I don't know, in Slovenia's past communist songs or something like that. But no, ideology is actually something much more sinister. It's the system of beliefs that we have and our values that actually support the existing order. The existing state of affairs, or are used to justify the world we are living in and its injustice. So ideologies are actually, to put it that way, the ways how we think that enable this kind of abuse. And another thing that ideology also does is it makes us think that the way the things are is totally natural, that this is a normal thing, that, you know, we are eating that meat 3 times a day, that we are wearing fur and so on, as if though this is normal and natural, and that it cannot be the other way. So that's another thing of the ideology. It actually operates in a hidden way. We don't see it immediately until we don't research it. Now, in the area of animal abuse, we have 3 distinct ideologies, which are, of course, interrelated. So the first one, and probably the most well-known one, is anthropocentrism. The word comes from Greek. Anthropos means a human being, and kentron means a point. So anthropocentrism is a worldview that basically posits humans at the center of the world. And it says that basically human values and human goals are the only important or the most important, and that actually everything else is here for humans to be handled according to their needs and wishes. So this is anthropocentrism, basically looking at the world from the human viewpoint and thinking that everything that's around you is basically somehow meant for you to be used. And in philosophy, we have this well-known saying, homo mensura, man is the measure of all things. That comes from Protagoras, from ancient Greek. So this is typically anthropocentric, meaning that humans are basically the yardstick of the universe. Now, what's very typical for anthropocentrism is that it ascribes instrumental value basically to everything. So it views living beings in the sense of their usefulness for human purposes. And the only being that has inherent or inner value that's valuable in itself are humans in this respect. And the one hallmark of instrumental value, if something has an instrumental value, it means it can be replaced easily. So it's replaceable. For instance, if this pen stops working, no problem. It only has instrumental value for me. It's valuable only because I can do something with it. If it stops working, I can just throw it away and pick another one. No problem here. And anthropocentrism would say that this is also how we view animals, at least livestock. You know, if we are fed up with one animal, we can just easily, you know, sell the dog online and buy a new one that's better and behaves in a more appropriate way. Or we can buy fish in the fish tank, and if they die, no problem. We just, you know, it's always. I heard the story about somebody who the guy that grew up thinking that his goldfish lived for 20 years. You know, it was how it died. How are you saying that goldfish has a lifespan of 2 years? Mine lived for 20 years, of course, because parents always replace the one in the fish bowl, right? So this is only viewing animals as instrumental value. And even if we love them, if we have them as pets, we can still only project instrumental value on them. Speciesism is something similar to anthropocentrism. It's basically discrimination that's based on biological species. So speciesism would claim that different species have different moral worth. And even if some species are very close to each other, some are used for food, some are maybe used only, some are used as pets, and so on. So speciesism, if racism is discrimination upon a race, sexism, discrimination upon gender, then speciesism is discrimination based upon biological species. What's really to remember, what's important to remember about speciesism is that it has this intersectional approach, which can be traced to bell hooks. Bell hooks was also one of the scholars in critical animal pedagogy, and I think that her idea that education should be a practice of freedom, and that transgression is inherent in education, in the sense of transgressing unjust world order, is very important. But I have to move on because I'll be running out of time. So maybe we will also post all of the presentations, PowerPoint presentations online, so you will be able to revisit that. So back to speciesism, yeah, this interesting book about from Melanie Joy really makes a point about speciesism, how we actually love dogs, eat pigs, and wear cows, even though we could say that those animal species are cognitively and emotionally pretty much similarly developed. But still, we use, or even worse, we raise pigs in order to feed them to our pets, which is quite, you could say, paradoxical, and it's a hallmark of speciesism. Now, also, for instance, what is important in speciesism is that it looks on animals as disabled humans, which is also kind of weird, because why would animals be disabled humans? They have their own abilities. This is the same as saying that humans are handicapped birds because we don't have wings to fly. Of course, this misses the whole point that each species has its own way of life, and the speciesism actually overlooks this fact. Another thing that's also present in speciesism is viewing one member of a species as representative of the whole species by overlooking individual differences between personalities. And this is easily seen in natural history collections, where you have one individual that tries to represent the whole species, or this used to be the case about 100 years ago with people coming from Africa, which were exhibited in such exhibitions. They lived basically similar to animals in the zoo, and they were portrayed as representatives, you know, of this kind of an original human being. So here you can clearly see how racism actually quickly becomes speciesism, and how these two ideologies are actually closely related. Now, the next one and the last one I'll be touching upon is carnism. This is expounded in this same book by Melanie Joy, and carnism is basically ideology that enables us to eat large quantities of meat, and that it also justifies meat eating and presents it as something normal and even necessary. It also teaches us how to withdraw our spontaneous compassion with animals. Oh, don't be sorry for those animals, they are just meant to be killed, and so on. So it basically installs emotional and value judgments in us from early age. And this is clearly seen in Jean Meyer's educational research work. Jean Myers spent some time with kindergarten kids and then with elementary school kids, and what he found out was not so surprising, actually, if you think about it, but maybe surprising to our standard developmental view of children, because he showed that actually younger children are more compassionate with animals than older children. Why shouldn't it be the other way around? The older you are, the more you can think about the world, the more you can identify with others, and the more compassionate you will be. Well, no, why not? Because you are also systematically taught to withdraw your compassion, for instance, from livestock. and a really interesting research by Gene Myers here. What is also interesting about carnism is that it tries to provide us with ways how we can rationalize this emotional stress that we are confronting when eating meat, because of course meat eating causes stress in people. Why? Because of course unnecessary suffering is morally problematic. We know that. And we know that animals suffer if meat is produced, and if we often eat meat, we are in a state of so-called cognitive dissonance, so in unstable mental state, and we have to somehow cope with this mental stress. And carnism actually provides ways how to cope with this cognitive dissonance, with mental stress, with excuses or rationalizations, in the sense that, well, livestock is meant to be killed, so there is nothing wrong with it, or eating a lot of meat is necessary for our survival, or animal abuse is important for the industry because we have to produce the GDP, or if we wouldn't eat animals, they would overpopulate the world, and so on. And you can see how misplaced this comment is if you bear in mind these graphs. So it's not the case that animals are just reproducing on their own. Basically, human activity is the one that's largely responsible for animal overpopulation. Now, carnism, and this is now the point of critical animal pedagogy. We are moving to this part now. Carnism and other ideologies are unfortunately often taught at school as a hidden curricula or even as explicit curricula. Why? Because we learn in natural sciences education how to study animals as objects. Also, in social sciences, like in geography, for instance, we view animals as commodities, like livestock production. Then sometimes animals are featured as therapeutic animals, like gadgets that we can use that will help us with our well-being. And also animals are often served as food in the school. So you have all this that's actually present in the school, and you can see how traditional school actually promotes those ideologies. Also, one interesting thing is how toys actually indoctrinate us into anthropocentrism. For instance, those farm sets are interesting. Here you have a dairy station for cows. So you as a young child already learned that cow is here to be milked, or that pig is here to be eaten, or here you have eggs, hens are here to lay eggs. Not eggs, but lay eggs. I'm sorry. So this is how actually we are from an early age on indoctrinated into ideologies that enable animal abuse and make it seem normal. Because if you play as a child with a cow, it's kind of, you internalize this idea that cows are here for something. And this is, remember, this is exactly the instrumental value. If cows are here for something, even dogs. When I was a kid, we used to say that dogs are here to guard our house, so they have a function to perform. Now, critical animal pedagogy, what is it? I already said that it tries to deconstruct those ideologies that are taking place in school and that enable animal abuse. Its main goal is precisely as this, to develop a critical consciousness that wants to result in transformative action. So what actually is critical consciousness? Well, critical consciousness is knowing how those ideologies operate. First of all, it's detecting those ideologies and then knowing how they operate. So it's about understanding the workings of mechanisms that enable animal exploitation. So that means to have a critical consciousness developed here. And this is now an important point also that cannot be overemphasized. The thing about critical pedagogy in general and critical animal pedagogy in specific is that it's often stressful. Why? Because, you know, we have this preconceived notions and it warns us about something, about injustice that's going on. And so it's stressful. It's not a pleasant thing because you have to deal with a lot of suffering and pain and injustice in the world. So critical pedagogy is a tough job. And this is what Joe Kinchelow emphasizes in his critical pedagogy primer. He also says that basically the problem when you have teacher education, like we do at our faculty, right? In critical teacher education, the problem is that you have to deconstruct a lot of assumptions that people already have, like preconceived notions. And challenging those assumptions can be stressful. So it's normal to be stressed. It's normal if you feel unpleasant, because what you are doing right now is challenging underlying assumptions that on which most likely your lifestyles are based. And remember, this is also connected with carnism, because as I said before, in carnism, the main problem is precisely this, that you have cognitive dissonance going on, and carnism neatly provides you excuses how to deal with this cognitive dissonance. And now critical animal pedagogy tries to deconstruct those excuses and normalizations, and that's why it can be stressful. So this is something we have to specifically warn you about. Yes, and knowledge that's produced within critical pedagogy and critical animal pedagogy is often transgressive. It's often dangerous in the sense that it threatens the established world order and how things operate, and that's why it's often ridiculed and causes conflicts. But of course, the great promise here is that, you know, slowly with time things will change, and that ideologies will be deconstructed, and that we will start living in the world will become a place where less animals will suffer and be senselessly murdered, basically for human needs. Now I have two examples that I'm using recently in order to show how this transgression can look like. One example is this one, where you have the dog that's actually in the Natural History Museum. So animals are often, remember when I was talking about speciesism, I showed you this slide and said that animals are within the speciesism often presented as one individual is presented as representative of the whole species. And this is exactly what's taking place here. Animals are presented in this naturalistic way, and also they are represented for human view in order to be seen by the human. And now what happens is that animal miraculously comes on the other side of the window. It kind of shatters this conceptual window, and the animal starts to return the gaze to the animal, and thereby returning the gaze to us. And for some, this is transgressive, because of course on this side only humans are normally allowed to be. And now actually animal comes to life in a way. Now the other example is the opposite. This is by Croatian artist Tajc Čekada, and she had this project when she was pumping the breast milk and was selling the human milk. This is human milk. And of course, immediately you have this disgusting reaction to it. But what it tries to show is that, you know, how we are actually instrumentalizing animals, and that's totally okay for us. We don't give it a second thought. But if we would do the same with humans, we would, of course, everybody would be shocked. And also we have this repulsion, which is cultural recognition, of course. And it shows what a big, maybe totally unconscious division there is between us looking at humans as having inherent worth and animals as a producers of our of commodities for us. So those are those transgressive elements that Bell Hooks talks about, also Foucault and Roncière and other scholars in the field. And it's meant to not just to shock people, but to broaden our horizons and to question our ideologies. Now, I would like to draw your attention just to the final slide. One of the problems in critical animal pedagogy is that we actually have to educate the elites, educating the oppressors. So those that are, because usually in critical pedagogy, you are trying to empower those that have been abused. But this is only the case with humans. If you have critical animal pedagogy, you are not educating animals about how they should be free. You are actually educating other people that are exploiting animals, that this is maybe not the best way to go on. However, here you are educating the oppressors, and what you often ran into is resistance and denial. And 2 years ago, we published this book, Environmental and Animal Abuse Denial, where me and Rana and also Karen from Norway tried to put together scholars that are working in the field of denialism in the environmental and animal ethics. Because as said, one of the main problems in these areas is not that people don't know what is going on, but that we don't want to know, because the knowledge about what is going on is dangerous, because it threatens to question our worldviews and our lifestyles. Yes, this is it. I burned almost all of the time that was planned for me. I think we only have 3 minutes left before we are supposed to go to the break. But please, if there are any comments or questions or any reactions to the talk, I would be glad to moderate the discussion. Josip, go ahead, please.
Hi, I was waiting for maybe someone else put a question, but I have maybe just one comment more than a question. For me, the definition of ideology was interesting here, because it's the definition of ideology with which we mostly work. Well, for me, for today's for our time, it's also very interesting the definition of ideology that was put by Mannheim, Karl Mannheim, in which, well, ideology functions in this way that it keeps it supports the existing order, but nominally, it has ideas which should go out of the existing order, in a sense. Mannheim uses here the example of Christian love in the time of feudalism. Well, of course, you are proposing Christian love, etc., but you are doing everything you can so that this idea doesn't occur in the world. Well, maybe today we have the same problem with ecological and environmental story, because, well, we are all for environment and we sign Paris deals, etc., etc., but in the end we are doing everything we can so that these ideas do not become alive. Well, we have another ideology in this sense, in the sense in which you use the term of ideology, and that is the ideology of constant economic growth. And one author said something like, I think I know his name, but I will not take a wild guess. Well, he said that in constant growth, if you believe in constant growth on the planet which has limited resources, you must be idiot or something like that, or economist. Well, I think that guy was economist. who said that. Well, that it was auto-critique. So we have here this problem that many of our concepts of ideology can be used for these topics. Just that. And this you were saying about environmental problems that are made by animal ideology of animal eating, etc.
Yeah, thank you, Josip. That's a really great point. Thank you for this further widening of the topic. I wrote it down, everything. I'll scrutinize it. I think it's a wonderful point. Can we, however, maybe, how could we apply this Mannheimian idea of ideology to animal abuse problematic? I'm thinking about it right now. And one thing that comes to my mind is this idea of happy animals, you know, happy livestock animals that are happy, that are grazing outside on the green pastures. Everything is wonderful. Yes, we eat them at the end, you know, but slaughtering is humane, so everything is okay. And in a way, you know, it's good for them, because if we wouldn't have eaten them, they wouldn't have been alive. So maybe, you know, how we actually connect the animal welfare with the grossest possible exploitation that there is. So do you think that's a viable application of Mannheim to animal ethics and animal abuse?
I think it is, because if we just use this idea of constant economic growth and we take our idea of economic system in which we live in, well, you can go another way in treating livestock. Well, it's only you can only have this great industrial farms so that your business will be profitable in a sense, because you will not be on the market if you don't have this. You can use that and say, okay, we really love animals, we show compassion towards them, we like pets. Human beings who doesn't love animal is like a monster for us. Well, why do you do not love animals? It's just normal to love animals. And we have pets, and we like to see animals on TV, on documentaries. And here our ideology works, and we say, okay, we love animals, we are doing everything we can in this sense you were talking about, so that our treatment of them is best possible, and that's the end of the story. So I think that this idea of happy animals serves this purpose in such a sense, as you already said. And we just have this idea that this framework in which we are, socio-economic framework, is it's only natural and only that we can have, in a sense. So in this way, I think we should come here more structurally and take this as one of the biggest problems, and one of the problems where ideology shows as its best. So, of course, I will take this comment of yours maybe into this framework I just presented. So, even though my English is not really the best one, so, but I hope you understand me.
I think it was a perfect comment. Thank you. Unfortunately, now we will, I suggest we just skip the break. If you are still, because it's still, you know, it's only 1 hour that we've been going, and it's about time for Branislava to start. So we'll skip this break, and maybe we will have a bit longer break than between the first and the second part. Okay, so now Branislava Vichar. Let me just quickly introduce Branislava. Branislava comes from Faculty of Arts, University of Maribor. She's chairing the Slovenistics department there. She works for years and years in critical animal studies and is one of the leading scholars in the field in Slovenia. And she will present a talk about the critical discourse analysis in speciesism in advertising. Branislava, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you, Tomasz, and hello, everyone. So now I share my screen.
We can see it, yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Tomasz. Okay, so my talk is related to the first lecture in the sense that I'll try to demonstrate how speciesism and anthropocentrism are conveyed in advertisements. Well, first, I planned an analysis of animal products advertisements, but when Tomasz informed me that specialists of critical animal studies would also be among our participants today, I've decided to present the type of advertisements that has so far received less scholarly attention than animal product advertisements. That is, I will talk about insecticide advertisements. So do you see the next slide?
No, it's still on the first one. You have to go, I think, manually. You have to click on the on those. Yeah, try clicking on 2.
What about now?
Still nothing. Maybe you should go to the to just the basics, osnovno, da ni dia projekcija, veš? Ne sme biti dia projekcija.
Aha, da ni dia projekcija.
Ja, ker če je dia projekcija, veš, on jemlje vsak slajd kot novo okno.
Aha, treba čakaj, bom še enkrat.
Ja, zdaj pa dela.
Okay, then I leave it like this. Okay, thank you. So genre analysis of television insecticide advertisements as a multimodal genre reveals a habitual format of communicative action. That is the problem solution format. The overall aim of advertisements of this kind is to persuade people to use a product or service. Although the problem solution genre is a general format that can be applied to a wide variety of problems and solutions, in insecticide advertisements, this strategy is limited to a specific anthropocentrically and speciesistically articulated problem, that is, insects breaking into the human home, and specific solution, that is the use of insecticide. The fundamental theoretical and methodological framework of this presentation is multimodal critical discourse analysis. So critical discourse analysis has probably made the most comprehensive attempt to develop a theory of the interconnectedness of discourse, power, and ideology, and is specifically concerned with the role that discourse plays in maintaining and legitimizing inequality in society. The analysis of critical discourse studies typically draws out these discourses showing what kinds of identities, actions, and circumstances are concealed, abstracted, or foregrounded in a text, pointing to the ideological and political consequences of this. When applied to human-animal relations, critical discourse analysis examines the role of discourse in the domination and oppression of other species by humans. General trust of critical discourse analysts has been towards the analysis of linguistic structures. But some critical discourse analysts have begun to focus on multimodal discourse because of the increasingly important role this plays in many social and political contexts. So the reason why critical discourse analysis has become more multimodal in its analysis is the realization that all levels of communications are shaped by power relations and ideologies, not just language. The theory that underpins the critical analysis of multimodal discourse is social semiotics, which in turn owes much to the work of critical linguists. In their book Reading Images, Kress and Van Leuven introduced the term multimodality, which they have subsequently defined as the integrated use of different semiotic resources, for example, language, image, sound, music, and so on, in texts and communicative events. In common with linguistics-based critical discourse analysis, the multimodal critical discourse analysis approach views non-linguistic forms of communication as a means of social construction. Multimodal critical discourse analysis not only uses the principles of multimodality to understand the nature of nonverbal communication, but to carry out the critical analysis of linguistic and visual discourses in the broader tradition of critical discourse analysis. Multimodal critical discourse analysis can be seen as an expansion in that it provides a systematic model for the study of the interaction between the verbal and the visual, that is the intersemiotic relationship between different modes. Multimodal critical discourse analysis therefore shows how images, photographs, diagrams, graphics, and sound work to create meanings which are often more implicit or indirect than language. The study of multimodal text is not only of importance for critical discourse analysis because so many contemporary texts are multimodal. It is also important in relation to the key aim of critical discourse analysis, that is studying the maintenance and legitimization of inequality, injustice, and oppression. And this for two reasons. The first is the importance of popular culture in contemporary politics. And the second reason is that discourses which legitimate injustice and violence, such as racist, colonialist, sexist, and speciesist, persist much longer in visual communication than in its verbal equivalent. So, using the tool of model analysis, I'll attempt to demonstrate the differences in the way humans and insects are represented in insecticide advertisements. That is, differences that play an important role in the legitimization of the killing of insects. Both human and animal participants are visually categorized, and categorization plays an important role in realizing one of the fundamental aims of these advertisements, to emphasize the threat of animals as the other. Humans are categorized culturally by the way they're dressed, which connotes the urban lifestyle of the middle class, and biologically with a youthful appearance, harmoniously proportioned bodies, and proper, pleasant, and attractive facial features. In contrast to the human participants, insects are visually categorized by repulsive, usually sharp features, strangely proportioned bodies, sinister and blatant stares, often with balled-up fists. They're usually portrayed with excessive emphasis on their bodily features, for example, with excessively long and sharply drawn sensors. mosquitoes and wasps with excessively increased stings, and so on. All insects have exaggeratedly pronounced mouths with large and sharp teeth. Additionally, they are linguistically categorized as flying enemies, pests, aggressive yellow jackets, or with dangerous attributes implicitly expressed in the assumptions contained in imperative sentences such as protect your family, or before your children are safe in bed, make sure you're safe from mosquitoes, and so on. Colors are also used to emphasize the danger. Humans as positively conceived characters are dressed in bright, calm colors, mostly white or pastel, and insects as others are portrayed in dark, mostly brown, or aggressive shades, for example, vivid green or vivid blue. The categorization that contrasts insects with humans, cultivating positive, like images of people, and negative connotations, like images of insects, is fundamentally determined by speciesistic ideology and corporate interests. Negatively constructed images of insects reinforce the simplification of the idea that insects are the enemies of humans and family life and form part of the process of the legitimization of killing them. In insecticide advertisements, the encounter of humans and insects in the human home is anthropomorphically constructed as an intentional act on the part of the insects, aimed at causing deliberate harm to humans. Insects are most often shown in the processes of attacking, preparing to attack, like sneaking into an apartment through various openings and cracks, then marching in battle formation, or warming up before the match, as contact with humans has been portrayed in advertisements. Or they're watching humans while waiting for the most appropriate moment to attack. They're observing humans with binoculars before they go to bed, or they're hiding behind a curtain and waiting for people to fall asleep. Contrary to the processes that represent aggression of insects, human behavior is portrayed in a way that emphasizes their calmness and warmth. Women, mothers, are most often involved in processes that represent the loving care of children. They read to children, embrace and cuddle them, help them with homework, or try to get them off to sleep. The construct of the thought-out and planned attack of the insects strengthens the notion that insects are human enemies that need to be removed as quickly and effectively as possible. The visual representations of insects in insecticide advertisements are based on animation and anthropomorphization. Visual representations like colors, body shapes, excessive emphasis of bodily characteristics such as stings or sensors, size, modes of movement, where insects lose most of the real features and most of the real behavioral patterns, are a source of negative emotional meanings and the effects of discomfort and fear, and thus directly participate in the construction and consolidation of negative social perceptions and prejudices towards insects. Since the animated image of insects is not consistent with the way insects live in reality, but offers a sensory experience of their portrayal, it also leads to specific psychological response. That is, rather than being perceived as having their own sense of existence, insects have been perceived as a dangerous occurrence which needs to be eliminated as quickly as possible. So in the next part of my presentation, I would like to present a comparative analysis of 2 television advertisements for 8 insecticide. The first rate original commercial advertisement from 1956, and the rate television commercial advertisement that was shot 50 years after the first one. I'm going to focus on changes in the representation of insects over the half century and their determination with the ideological context of production and consumption. The first insecticide advertisements were generally twice as long as their contemporary counterparts. While the original rate advertisement lasts 1 minute, the length of the rate television commercial advertisement is 29 seconds. But the latter consists of several structural units, since they are characterized by short, rapidly changing shots. So let me show the original rate advertisement first.
And new bug killer discovery from Johnson's Wax. Raid contacts and kills all kinds of bugs indoors. Raid hunts them down like radar. Sweeps bugs from the air. Attacks them as they crawl. And kills them dead. A little goes a long way. Kills bugs even where they hide. Yes, Raid kills flies, mosquitoes, roaches, ants, all kinds of bugs indoors. Outdoors, Raid protects your garden too. A little kills insects that attack flowering plants, evergreens, vegetables. Caution, ordinary household sprays kill plants. Raid saves plants. So don't buy several bug killers, get Raid. First bug killer for house and garden. Raid House and Garden Bug Killer.
So insects in this advertisement capture our attention with elements of salience, such as the size or articulation of light. But the most salient elements in the composition of the shots are domestic items, such as the sugar bowl or drawer. Salience of object is created with the composition of a shot. That means objects are foregrounded, and the size of frame. A medium shot is used. The visual composition, which exposes these domestic items, creates an association with an uncomfortable life. It warns the audience to the ubiquity of insects in the human home, even in places where we store food. And this strengthens the speciesistic stereotype of insects as an annoying occurrence. Insects are mainly involved in the processes of fear, upset, and panic. These processes are implicated particularly by the insect's poses. Their mouths are wide open, their shoulders are raised, and arms are closed. The most salient element of the insect's bodies are their eyes. Salience is achieved with size and overlapping. Their eyes extend over the edges of their heads. Fear is sometimes further implied by an anthropomorphic gesture. In fear and helplessness, the ant clasps her head. Upset and fear are also signaled by the tone and pitch of the voice and volume of the scream. This kind of effectiveness of the advertised insecticide. And of course, with the anthropomorphic attribution of the insect's awareness of its destructive effects. The durable effectiveness of the insecticide is also indicated by the acronym RIP, rest in peace, on the tombstones that symbolically appear on the kitchen floor after the insects are engulfed by the insecticide cloud. So let's take a look at the second advertisement now.
Notice yellow jacket now.
Stop aggressive yellow jackets and their games before they attack your family. Lure them away with the Raid disposable yellow jacket trap.
I just want sweet hang. More like a final resting place.
Family, new Raid disposable yellow jacket trap. Kills yellow jackets. S.C. Johnson, the family company.
So in comparison with the portrayals of insects in the original Raid advertisement, in the Raid television commercial advertisement, the wasps are depicted in aggressive poses. Their gazes are threatening and sinister, and their bodily features are exaggerated. The size of the wasps, as well as the size of the individual part of their bodies, are exaggerated. In particular, the stings. The threatening and dangerous image of the wasps is emphasized with an additional sting on their heads, which real wasps don't have. The wasps are, except in some scenes showing them ending up in the trap, portrayed as behaving aggressively. They're involved in the processes of attacking and persecuting humans. The aggressive image of the wasps is also expressed through linguistic elements, as we could hear with explicit attributes of aggression, aggressive yellow jackets, and acts of attack, like before. The intention of occupying a human living space is anthropomorphically implied in the statement, "Let them know this is yellow jackets' turf now." The implicit assumption of the danger of the wasps is embraced in the slogan, "Defend your family." In contrast to wasps, humans are portrayed as helpless and visibly scared. Showing the family at the table at the lower level implies their vulnerability and exposure, while the effect of depicting wasp using a low-angle shot is to make them appear threatening and frightening. Well, in both Raid advertisements, insects are positioned as objects that we must deal with. However, the dominant topos in the first advertisement is topos of disadvantage. That means the fact that insects are in the human home is harmful and annoying, and therefore they must be destroyed. While the second advertisement is based on the topos of danger and threat. Insects threaten the safety of human home and family. The images of insects in later advertisements are aggressive and threatening, and the attribution of negative anthropomorphic constructs such as intentional acts, maltreatment, invasion, and so on is significantly increased. Creating prejudice-based speciesist constructs of insects as aggressive and dangerous occurrences is an integral part of the development of corporate capitalism. The aim of constructing the fear of insects and persuading the audience of their potential danger is intended to increase the sale of insecticides and an increase in the corporate production associated with it. So, to conclude, the beings that we every day do not even perceive, who are, as the Slovenian poet Jure Ditela wrote regarding the human perception of insects, at the edge of perception, are only perceived at the moment that find themselves in the human home. As a plague, as a danger that has to be eliminated as soon as possible. Television insecticide advertisements with specific speciesistic meanings co-create social imaginary, since they reproduce speciesistic ideologies and anthropocentric aspects. They had to create hierarchical social structures that is subordinate the structural position of insects, as well as patterns of perception and understanding of insects that is understanding insects as threatening and dangerous. Applying this constructed understanding, insect oppression becomes a social practice that is shaped as a normal way of life. Insecticide advertisements do not represent insects as beings with their own sense of being, but rather as a problem against which action is needed. Therefore, absolving humans from all moral duties toward insects. In doing so, they skillfully erase not only the real insect's features, but also the activities that insects perform in their habitat. And insects' encounters with humans is misleadingly, anthropomorphically portrayed as the intention of insects. The anthropomorphic and animated representation of insects in advertisements has a double discursive purpose. The first purpose is to attribute negative characteristics to them, and the second, to erase insects as real beings from human consciousness. This kind of animation also shapes the attitude of the audience toward the killing of insects, as eradicating insects as living beings is depicted in the style of eliminating dangerous features in video games. The symbolic erasure of insects rests the real physical erasure, that is, the killing and extermination of insects as a self-evident and unquestionable practice. So, thank you for your patience, and now I'll be glad to hear any comments.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Branislava. So I have a couple of comments, but let me first give the opportunity to our guests if anyone would like to ask, comment. Maybe then I can go first to, oh no, Ulrike. Ulrike raised her hand. I'm sorry that I didn't see you before. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much for your talk. It was very impressive. It's just a comment that I recognized that the flies, the flies in one of the advertisements looked like they fly as a military flight, as an attack or something like that. Was very impressive.
Yes, thank you. Yes, yes, that's one of the constructs of insects, like aggressive military. Yes, this is one.
Looked like a formation, you know, these military flights when they, and so look the flies.
Yeah, there are some ads that are like a whole military formation. Yes, marching towards the humans. Yes. Yes, this is one of the attributes. Yes.
Yes, I'm very glad that you emphasized how those commercials actually erase insects as real beings, because to me, the first thing that was really obvious was how cartoonish they are. You know, humans are real, you know, in both commercials, humans are actually actors, human actors, but insects are presented as those, you know, annoying little animal, not really real beings, as if though you are basically playing a video game by killing them. And another thing that's maybe interesting with insecticides is that they actually developed out of chemical weapons. So chemical weapons were first used in the First World War, and then in this interim between the two wars period, they were then transformed into insecticides. So that's they have paradoxically, or maybe poignantly, they actually do have this military history behind them, only that they were not killing insects but other humans. Okay, anybody else, please, we have some time. Rana, do you want to? Yeah. Rana, turn on your mic.
Thank you very much, Branislava. That was very insightful. My question is, have you had a chance to look at commercials in Slovenia and how they compare to American style commercials with respect to insecticides? Because I think I recognize a typical US theme that is protecting the family. And I was wondering whether that is comparable to European cultures.
Yes, this is typically, yes, from the first television insecticide advertisements in 1950s. Women who inhabit the main role in caring for the home and the family have been the main characters in advertisements. Yes, that's true. And this is, I'm not talking about Slovenian, this is for global American advertisements, but I'm relating to your comment. As I discovered in 1990s, images of children began to appear in insecticide advertisements. And children have become, according to the revived ideology of innocent childhood in Western culture, the bearer of meanings of innocence and vulnerability. So yes, these are typical, yes, advertisements for Western culture, but I don't think we have a special Slovenian. We have more or less, we have translated this, yes, these other ads are translated in Slovenian language. So I don't know, maybe Marietka and Tomasz know maybe any specific Slovenian insecticide advertisement. I don't know. All that I know are translated from others.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. But yes, maybe this introduction of the child is, yes, it's important because it's an essential element in the representation of the mother consumer, yes, which promotes the consumption of products aimed at ensuring the welfare and happiness of children, yes, as an entry point for household consumption, yes. So this is connected with yes, consumerist capitalism, and yes, and yes, and in all insecticide advertisements, children are represented as helpless in the need of family, that is mother's protection against allegedly dangerous insects. Yes, that's so. Yes,
Thank you,
really good point that you made. Yes, yes, it's really very present, especially after 1990s. Yes, so thank you. Yes.
I think we have this PEEPS, or we used to have this PEEPS insecticide.
Yes,
I don't know if we still have that. I found this online. So this used to be like a Slovenian thing. Everybody knows PEEPS. I think the brand name actually, you know, when sometimes the brand name becomes a designator of the item as such, you know, like, you know, I think that this PEEPS became something like that in Slovenia. However, here, and that is the different image, I think that the imagery of insects when they are portrayed only statically is different than when they are portrayed in commercials in movies, because usually we portray them as this aggressive ugly beings, or you know, like this lice, or those magnified under electronic microscope and so on.
It's also biokill, which is very known in Slovenia.
Yeah, because it kills in a naturally acceptable way.
Yeah. Yes, this is also a good point, Marietka. Yes.
So anybody else wants to contribute? Some hellos. Hi, Josie.
Thank you for having me here. I just joined, and Bratislava, very nice to see you too. Now, real.
Yes, online. It's very nice to see you too.
And I jumped in seeing your last slide, which of course I really liked. Flies have the right to more than life. They have the the right to be curious. So
Yeah.
very nice. I was interested in your presentation, and nice. I got like a little bit of it, and yeah, that is. I was really. It was really interesting to jump in and to see that last slide. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you.
Now we are happy that you joined us.
Yeah.
So now maybe we can have this 5-minute break that we skipped before. And so we'll be back at 10:30 and we'll continue with Reingard. See you soon.
Good to see you.
Yes, see them. Oh, it's really nice to jump in lava. I just came back from the rounds, so yes, very good. So you go on your break as well, Rana. I will.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. Don't want to take up this.
No.
Space.
I'm all set to go.
It's very nice. So it's good to join. Very big, nice group. Also.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
I responded via email to our about Friday meeting. I can't remember what the issue was. I remember that you proposed to have a meeting. And I thought, oh yeah, why not? For an end of the year, like looking forward to next year, maybe it's good to have a little exchange.
I think I can do 12, but I will write you on the email or later.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Very good. Yes, actually going to jump to the Netherlands and be back. So
okay.
Monday morning would also be possible, but I think it's good to go tomorrow.
Yeah, whatever is good for you. On Monday, I will have a meeting with Christina, who will join us on the mapping project with Francesco.
Yes.
So if you decide to have the meeting on Monday morning, she could jump in as well.
Okay.
So you get a picture of her.
Yes.
But you decide what is good for you.
Yes. Okay. Good. Yes, interesting. Also the whole advertising development. There's so much to take into different perceptions.
Yeah, I was also thinking about the newly developing danger of transmitting diseases. That might be a new push for insecticides.
Yeah, well, that is the threat of insects bringing diseases is I think already a long going.
Yeah.
Probably also depend a little bit on the culture, but I really like the last slide. I was like,
yes, I'm very sorry that Branislava could not come in summer. I think she would have enjoyed.
But we will meet somewhere probably.
Yeah.
Yes. No, there will be definitely possibility to.
There'll be a better time.
There'll be a better time. Yes.
Yeah.
And there's so much to address. Topics do not miss. So I think I actually also we will go back a little bit to the horse perception next year, because I saw it was National Horse Day the other day.
Okay.
In America. To sensibilize American citizens for the added value of horses to economics, traditions, and the national image. So I shared, so it's actually about a lot of things, but not about the horse. So, and then the wild horse protection, who tends to share that without diving into the significance. So you can also see that there's really a clash of values that you see National Horse Day and think,
but,
oh, wow.
but even on the surface, how contradictory can it be? They keep killing wild horses. That's a big issue in the States.
So that's why I thought like, well, this is such an empty celebration.
Yeah.
What on earth are you stating? Nothing.
Yeah.
Yes, so we'll see. Looking for it. I'm all one.
We'll see. Please speak up if you want to add anything. I would love you to.
Okay, but I think it will go very smooth. And see Ulrika also. Hello. So a proper hi Thomas.
Hello.
Hello.
So we are back. Our next presenter speaker is Reingard Spanning from University of Innsbruck. I know Rana for many years now. We work together, and I think she's a top scholar and also practitioner in critical animal studies. But and that being said, I think it's better if I just pass the word to Reingard, and she'll deliver a paper on self-determination in respect not only to humans but also other animals. Rana, please.
Okay. Thank you very much for your introduction, Thomas. I have added Jose to to the title because I'm working on this project together with her. She is sort of delivering the critical ethological point of view, and we try to bring together social science and ethology. But in this paper today, I will only present what I have found in the social sciences and in particular in psychology. And we will keep discussing how and whether that fits together. So the title of my presentation is Critical Animal Pedagogy and Self-Determination Theory. And I would just like to reiterate what Thomas has already said with respect to what critical animal pedagogy is. In this field, we criticize economic and political structures that exploit non-human animals. For example, in the meat and dairy industry, but elsewhere too, as Thomas has pointed out. We deconstruct anthropocentric and speciesist beliefs and practices. We support the development of vegan lifestyles, and we seek more ethical relationships with other animals more generally. And this last point is what I am working on together with Jose. And for my presentation today, I will argue that it is difficult to liberate other animals as long as we cannot liberate ourselves. We permit ourselves to be oppressed and functionalized by society, and we oppress other animals, not only through direct exploitation, for example, through the meat industry, but also by forming them to fit into our society, that is, functionalizing them. In critical animal pedagogy, we think about connecting the field with critical pedagogy more generally. And I think Thomas has already mentioned Paulo Freire, and I will come back to him as well in trying to consider ways of how we could escape from this conundrum. So one of the founding fathers of critical pedagogy, Paulo Freire, one of his most important mottos was that education is never neutral. It can oppress or liberate. And he spoke from a context, a background that was in Latin America under conditions or under the effects of colonialism, under development and dependence. And he emphasized how the colonizers' education system that was established in those countries led to a culture of silence. And more generally, we as critical pedagogues would follow his claim that the education system reproduces an oppressive social system and fulfills the colonizers' or the elite's interests. How does he do that? Or how does the education system operate in order to be able to do that? And this becomes visible in Freire's critique of the banking model. For him and for critical pedagogues, it's the teachers who deposit knowledge in students like money in a bank account. Students reproduce that knowledge. The better this transmission works, the better the teacher and the students. And the problem is that students do not learn to express themselves, nor to be critical of society and of power structures. By contrast, Freire's pedagogy of dialogue leads to liberation. Now, as you can see on this little drawing, people come together to talk about their life experiences, to talk about problems they encounter, and to analyze where these problems come from and how they might be solved. Teachers and students learn at the same time. Both are learning subjects. They share and produce knowledge together. The oppressed resist being an object of pedagogy. If you remember the last drawing with the teacher putting money into the bank account, in that situation, the student is an object. Here, the students become subjects. They become agents, and in becoming subjects and agents, the culture of silence can be transcended. However, we have a little problem in applying Freire to our concerns in critical animal pedagogy, because for Freire, liberation means understanding one's oppressed situation, that is being very analytic. It's about conscientization, politicization, and emancipation. And most importantly, it means moving from a suppressed animal-like life to a true human life, what is called humanization. And of course, you can readily see where the problem lies, that animals cannot become humans. So Freire's anthropocentric humanism limits its applicability to non-humans. Animals are the state of humans have to overcome in order to become humans. You have to imagine the oppressed state of people in Latin America under colonialist conditions. They live very poor lives, and Freire says it's an animal-like life. And in order to become agents and subjects, they have to become more human. Emancipation presupposes a particular form of learning or consciousness that leads to a predetermined behavioral product and truth, which amounts to banking education too. So here we have a contradiction in Freire's work, if we consider it for our field of thinking. So the question arises, what emancipation and what learning? What kind of emancipation could we imagine, and what kind of learning could we imagine that would be helpful in our situation? So first of all, we want to get rid of this idea that humans or animals have to become something else. We want instead to start from equality in difference. We are all animals. And difference is not a deficit that needs to be overcome. Another thing that needs to be said with respect to this issue of what emancipation or learning we are considering is that we want to give up the idea that learning is a movement towards a pre-given form of being or consciousness. Because any learning towards a predefined end amounts to behavioristic training. And that is the same as Freire's banking model, which he rightly criticized. So as I said before, here is a contradiction in Freire's work, and we want to find a way around this difficulty. What could that be? Let us come back to the behavioristic model that Freire criticizes, because I still think that this is useful as a starting point. Freire's banking model and all forms of functionalization and self-commodification are based on this model. They produce desired behavior or they eliminate undesired behavior. You can see in this drawing that the subject is a black box and you have an input, a stimulus, and out comes a particular reaction. And by using rewards and punishment, you manage this input-output relationship. However, this proposes a relationship of authority or power, because the one who gives the stimulus is in power of producing a certain behavior. So in this model, there is no subject. Yeah, these psychologists who developed the behavioral paradigm did not see it important to have a subject theorized. However, in the meantime, we have found out that behavioristic training has a lot of negative consequences for the subject. And these are, among many, that it produces less intrinsic motivation, less ownership, curiosity, creativity, risk-taking, cooperation, and responsibility-taking. And too much self-control implies or can imply inner conflicts, anxiety, and drivenness. So it's not so healthy to apply this paradigm to living beings. Instead, we're looking through the glasses of self-determination theory at subjects, and we start from the observation that all animals thrive when they experience autonomy, competence, and relationship. And that the thriving is visible in curiosity, creativity, empathy, and well-being. Behind this, this concept is an understanding of the self as a self-organizing organism that applies to all living beings. So that includes not only humans, but also non-humans. All living beings have organizational tendencies to initiate and maintain health and integrity. All living beings have a sense of self and autonomy, a proactive engagement with the world, seeking and elaborating on information. And that is something that we obviously share with all other living beings. And that living beings can feel and sense intrinsic motivation that is connected with joy. So I will show you a model of this theory. The authors, Desi and Ryan, distinguish between amotivation, extrinsic motivation, and intrinsic motivation. And you can consider amotivation as something like helplessness. Yes, if we feel helpless, if we think that we are not able to do something or that our behavior has no effect, we are amotivated. We feel helpless. In the category of extrinsic motivation, you find a continuum of different forms of control. There can be external control, and as we move along this dimension, we end up with internalized control. That means that we have integrated the society's norms within ourselves. Sorry, I have difficulties moving the cursor. And with intrinsic motivation, there is ownership and autonomy. The problem with internalized control is that it is associated with functionalization. Yes, we have internalized all the norms of society and we function according to these norms without thinking. They have become natural to us. There is no other way of behaving outside these norms. And sometimes we can feel inner conflicts and alienation. But I think the larger problem is not that we feel inner conflict, but that we think that society is as it should be, and that it's normal and necessary to have society as it is, and that we conform to its rules and norms. Whereas with ownership and autonomy and intrinsic motivation, there is inherent satisfaction with what we are doing. And just to add some pictures in the human realm, these would be forms associated with slavery or, as I said, punishment and rewards, especially with children. And once we have achieved internalized control, it's like sitting in our own cage. And this can also be applied to animals, confining animals, torturing animals, or here with the rats, the external control in the form of electroshocks to make the rat behave in certain ways. And finally, you also end up with internalized behavior when it seems like the horse is doing things on its own, but it was actually trained to do these things. Please, Jose.
Also going back to the previous one, maybe it's interesting also to for the understanding how the internalized control actually makes you even more helplessness, because with the slave, with whether a human or a horse, when constraints are still visible, you can still have your fight against something because intrinsic motivation is still alive, while in the caged one, as in the horse world, that would be a horse at liberty, it seems free, but it's even worse because the conditions are not visible anymore. So the internalized control that Rana made explicit is, I think, one of the most important to understand, especially in our modern, well-functioning society.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jose, for clarifying. For me, in this context, the really fascinating and important question is, how can we move from internalized control back to intrinsic motivation? How can we find our intrinsic motivation again? And how can we allow other animals to find their own intrinsic motivation? Here I'm using the concept of subjectification by the education scientist Gerd Biester. I will not go into the concept, but just consider how this might help us to understand this move from integrated forms of motivation to intrinsic motivation. And that is pausing in our daily routines, functionings, and expectations to reconsider and feel for our intrinsic motivation. To allow ourselves to experiment with modes of being that have or had no place in the existing order of things. And we are so occupied with fulfilling roles and expectations that we normally don't think about doing things in different ways or doing other things that fall outside this order. And also transgressing the limits of our identities and social positions. Gerd Biester discusses this with respect to lifelong learning and the expectation of our society that you constantly keep learning to keep up with the demands of the labor market, for example. And once you identify as, you self-identify as a lifelong learner, that puts special demands on you, how to fulfill this role, and you occupy yourself with thinking how you could be a good lifelong learner. But can you step outside this identity and role? Can you do something else? Or being a good consumer, or being a good dog owner, maybe. There are certain expectations connected with that. And we limit our being in the world if we try to only fulfill these roles and expectations. Okay. How can we preserve intrinsic motivation in others? In particular, I think by interrupting our routines, handling and controlling them. Interrupting our perceptions of them. That would mean what and who they are, and our expectations towards them, what or who they should be. For example, a good dog, what Tomasz mentioned earlier today. What is a good dog? And if he does not fulfill these expectations, can we dispose of the dog? Or in our case, can we train him better to fulfill our expectations? So I think there is something to take a step back and interrupt. And providing safe space and time for them to develop their own intrinsic motivation, questions and expressions. Is there anything else, Jose, you think we could add?
Okay, so to preserve the intrinsic motivation, of course, it requires that part a little bit going back to the fly. So the safe space for time to maybe rather than develop their intrinsic motivation, but to recognize curiosity. So to recognize curiosity also, because if we think about what is a good dog or not, maybe also that dog doesn't remember who they are. So finding back your own curiosity is not so easy if you are already used to answer to the right expectations. So finding curiosity also something, seeing that attention and interest without the need to give an answer. So seeing the questions and the expressions without concluding them. Maybe you rephrase that in your own words, but I think the part of recognizing something without needing to follow up on that, so it can stay in one's own dialogue of intrinsic motivation. So do reformalize that in your own sitting in. So there's no need to follow up on recognizing coming from an intrinsic motivation, as an intrinsic motivation is already something to recognize. It doesn't need, because that's a real slippery slope that once we see it, we then think we need to do something with it. It doesn't need to be stimulated.
Yeah, I think that is also something that we find in parent-children relationships when we observe people outside, how often they interrupt the curiosity of their children and try to do something with it. Yeah, rather than just letting it be. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Right, I think with that, I'll come to the last slide. My conclusion with just bringing it back to critical animal pedagogy. I think it's useful to apply Freire's critique of the banking model in education and behavioristic training for humans and non-humans. But the Freirean concept must be redefined with respect to what liberation and learning means. I think Freire's concept is a typical modernist concept that even for postmodernity more generally does not fit so well anymore, and in particular not if we want to take non-human animals on board. And I think that the self-determination theory can give us a trans-species frame and an ethical yardstick for human-animal relationships. Okay, the pictures are from the German painter Helmut Kliebert, just to name the sources as well.
And
Thank you very much.
And what about the drawings, Rana?
Oh my. They are my little attempts to put my thoughts into drawn metaphors.
I think they're fantastic. If you would have more time, I would ask you to help me prepare. I think they are very good. Thank you, Rana. So we are up for discussion. Josip.
Thank you very much. I'm willing to ask the same question as you. I was interested in the author of the illustrations, but I know it now, and I'll maybe also ask you sometimes. Could you help me with some of my presentations? Thank you very much. Thank you for this wonderful introduction in Freire, because it will shorten my presentation, which is a good thing. I would like to comment something on this discussion that Jose started. Sorry for my pronunciation. This idea of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, and especially with this intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. One thing is interested, maybe more on the field of education itself, not really in this topic, but we may just apply it or not to this idea. Well, your Slovenian Slava Žižek is interesting to me when he is talking about yours, I think, of Tomáš and Branislav, when he's talking about modern permissive father. Well, he says something as, I like very much this old school father who says just, you have to visit your grandma, I don't take no for answer. But he says, the modern permissive father is more problematic, because he says something like, well, you don't have to visit your grandma, but you should know that grandma loves you, etc. Well, he's in a sense producing some intrinsic motivation. Okay? And we have this in interesting way. We think that this is like postmodern thing, but we have it in classic philosophical authors on education. Rousseau, for example, whom I really love, as my students know, but he has some crazy ideas. One of the crazy ideas, which is interesting at the beginning, but it's dangerous in a kind, is that you should let the kid think that he is in charge, but in that way you really be his master. Well, he says, directly something as subordination is maximal if the subordinated feel free. So I'm just curious if these ideas can be interesting. Well, critique of these ideas can be interesting in the subject we are dealing here with. Okay.
I think, thank you, Josip. Did you address Jose in particular?
No, I was addressing this discussion you already had during your presentation, so it's question for all if they can find something interesting in these thoughts.
I can add to the line of thinking, which I agree with from my experience, of course, because what is agreeing not so interesting. But it's when you have like the modern non-violent parenthood or non-conditional parenthood, which is what Josip is referring to, but then with more American terminology. So how the non-conditional parenthood is actually really much about conditioning, because the parents are expressing what they wish all the time, but then leave the other free, which is interesting. I think also, Rana, for us to dive a little further into the mechanisms of how the intrinsic motivation or extrinsic motivation is internalized. So that's a good bridge, actually, Joseph. Very nice to bring along. Yes, thank you.
I also think that there is a lot in Desi and Ryan in that way, because I think they are very intrigued by the thought, how can we make an educational situation feel as if it was intrinsic motivation? And then they discuss how the teacher should behave and place his external control while still maintaining a little space where students have the impression that they are in control. So for me, there is no, in their work, there is no real bridge between internalized control and intrinsic motivation. They do not problematize internalized control. They do link it with concepts like transformative learning, but I don't really think it works out like that.
Maybe also because often the idea of autonomy becomes an image and not so much an experience. So like if we stick with, as it has been mentioned, the dog example. So what's autonomy in the dog? Very popular today, that you can create space for a dog or a horse or a child to make their own choices. So you can choose if you want to do this or that. But if you have no idea where you are and you have no culture of yourself, the possibility to make a choice is just not interesting, because it doesn't add something to your own experience. It's just a produced reaction upon the situation. But it's interesting. I think it's interesting to dive into the internalized, or the how it doesn't become a problem as the image seems correct, actually, which seems free.
But also the standard conditioning thing is pretty interesting, you know, because by starting to condition certain behavior, we are actually really disrupting this normal intuitive pattern. And there is this wonderful story by Machado de Assis, a great Brazilian writer. And the story goes like this, that there an older man fell on the road, and then a kid came running and helped him to stand up back on the feet and give him back his belongings and so on. And then the older man went into the pocket and gave a little money to the boy. And then he says, and so the boy learned that there is a price to help, so that you can because before that, the help was just intuitive and natural. But now, of course, we've trained that even ethics, by rewarding, we trained the boy that even ethics has a price. I remember specifically this point in Rousseau. I remember the quote from the book, Josip. It's exactly like this, yeah, that the time where the power operates the most is when subjects think that they are free. But this idea of actually internalizing motivation comes already from Locke. John Locke, and some thoughts concerning education, he has this idea that we should replace physical reward and punishment by, on the one hand, shame, and on the other hand, praise, because this is how children will internalize this instance of educator, and they will behave according to our rules even when we won't be physically present. That's his argument for internalization. And think about it. That's if you educate people by praising, even if you drop out the blame, because in modern educational context, we don't talk about punishment anymore. We just talk about reward. But even that's very problematic, because what kind of subjectivity are you molding by rewards? A conformist, somebody who will do something only in order to get the praise, reward, fame, and so on. It's basically a Facebook-like culture, or Instagram heart culture, and that's so it's very problematic actually to employ praise as an educational device.
The punished by rewards, Alfie Cohen, the punished by rewards. Yes.
Yeah, so actually even positive motivation is bad. We are talking about positive motivation, but we now see that this is very problematic. Yeah, we have some more time, so please chime in.
Dive into it. Oh, sorry, go Justin, please.
I just try to say Rousseau is against punishment and awards, so there is something good about him.
Yes, well, so
yeah.
I will just add something. So please, whoever was starting to comment, go ahead, because.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe I will just comment briefly, because I find it this presentation very, also others, but this also very interesting. I'm not from your field, education field. I'm from philosophy field, and right now I'm studying the philosophy of animal law. So maybe just a comment about the external, extrinsic motivation and intrinsic one, because I saw a correlation with the animal law also. And this extrinsic, external motivation that becomes internal mechanism, I see related to animal welfare. So the protection of, in the meaning of protection of animals, because they have to behave in certain ways, so we can protect them. But in the bottom line, I mean, the persons that are really protected inside the animal welfare are the owners. The owners of, I don't know, in the history of slaves, or in the right now legislation, the owners of the animals or of the industry and so on. So it's really difficult to say that in nowadays animal legislations they are really protected. And if I go to the intrinsic motivation, which is it's showing an autonomous being as such. These are, I see a correlation to animal rights, because it's not the same protection and rights. In the protection field of animal law, animals are objects like slaves were, and in the intrinsic motivation fields, like you presented, the beings are autonomous. So I guess they are subjects of themselves in that meaning, and this is the field that it's now really the top field in related to animals. It's animal law as a concept, as a term that gives and wants to give rights as right holders to animals, so to be autonomous beings. And so what does it mean? It means that they have the right, I don't know, not to suffer, but first of all, they have the right, they should have the right to life, to freedom, and also, which is directly correlated with motivation, also the right to flourish. So we should give them space and time to make their own decisions, to think what they want in a specific moment, because animals, as a matter of fact, can do that if we give them freedom. So if I just conclude, for education field, I think it's, but also for law faculties and so on, it's very important that we teach not animal protection, because I really, it's a term that it's inside our heads, like a mechanism that we talked about, the extrinsic. It's already a mechanism, a concept that we are more than them, that we have to protect them, and I don't think it's right to use it in terms of, I don't know, also humanities or an education. And it's better that we use terms like animal rights, autonomous beings, and I don't know, maybe some aspects that are not defined in the anthropocentric way. So more maybe in biocentric or maybe in zoocentric, that we also in language, in talking and education, we give them a place that is equal or almost equal to ours. So I find it also this very important. So thank you very much. Just a comment.
Thank you very much.
Shall I add something there, Anna?
Yes, please, please.
So thank you, Priscilla, for opening that reflection. So of course, which is hugely important, also the difference between protection and rights, because it's indeed also the problem of today, where we will end up also from a human animal point of view, for whoever doesn't fit in society will be eliminated because cannot be protected. So then you have a problem. So very colonial thinking, which is already happening in sanctuaries. Those non-human animals that do not fit the best practice method to adapt to living, they actually feel like anticipated euthanasia, that they are better off dead, because if not, they have a terrible life if they need to go in conflict all the time, which also happens today with younger generations who just do not understand how you can live in society if you feel in conflict with it. So you're better off not being in society. So this really brings back the right to be in conflict, also the right to protest, the right to be an animal, whether human or non-human animal, that has a possibility also to express a disagreement. And that means that everybody living in modern society needs to be good in experiencing disagreements again. So to get rid of all the need to have a positive response from others, because that actually creates a loophole in which we all try to fit everybody, because we can't experience those kind of expressions anymore. And that also brings back, of course, the need for an anti-species tautology, because as long as animal knowledge remains stuck into species-specific behavior, there is just no knowledge throughout the world of understanding a non-human animal as someone with their own interest, like the fly with the right to their curiosity. If we only understand the fly as fly-specific behavior, you will never see that fly in that moment with that curiosity to whatever is going on. And if we don't recover that attention, we can never facilitate someone in their own intrinsic motivation, which is whatever it is at that specific moment, not something we can address as a predefined image. So it takes curiosity from all of us to preserve the intrinsic motivation. Yeah, thank you for opening that.
That's how democracy should be, I mean. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll have some time also for the discussion after Josip, but now without a break, Josip, please, if you are ready. Josip is a set from Split, from basically Faculty of Arts, but it has a different name in English. I think it's Faculty of Education and Culture, correct?
It's Faculty of Humanities and Social Science.
And Social Sciences.
Filozofski fakultet in Croatian. Philosophical faculty it should be, but it is translated in order to fit this, fashion.
Yeah, and Josip, you'll present something about, not something, but Paulo Freire and his childlikeness. So for the third time, Freire, but this time, I think with most focus. So please, Josip.
Thank you very much. Just a second. Where should I click to
You
share
should go to share screen is on the bottom, and it's a green rectangle, and it says share screen.
Okay, it's so obvious, but I'm stupid. Okay, just a second. Well, do you see my presentation? I put it in PDF so that I don't have these problems we have with sharing. Okay, utopia, childlikeness, and non-human animals. I could easily put the continuation of the title, because it could be Utopia, Childlikeness, and Non-Human Animals in Paulo Freire. He will be the topic of my presentation. Thank you, Reinhard, very much for making this.
Josip, just to say, be careful with the microphone, because we hear a lot of scratching.
Okay, those are my papers, I think.
Yeah, no, it's much better.
Thank you, Reinhard, for many insights into Freire. So I'll just keep this this introduction in Freire, and maybe we can have something after this. Well, in the discussion. Well, at the first glance, in Paulo Freire's pedagogical work, one can hardly find any potential or incentives for constructing the case for moral consideration of non-human animals, let alone animal ethics education. It seems that, like most educational theories and philosophies, Freire's one is firmly anthropocentric. Due to the Marxist influence on his philosophical anthropology, its chances of becoming something else are even more thwarted. However, it seems that Freire's philosophical anthropology makes representative material for a critique of human-animal relationship, or more precisely, human-animal comparisons, from which I will start this presentation. Well, in his most famous work, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, one can read that animals, unlike humans, cannot separate themselves from their activity and thus reflect upon it. They cannot set objectives, they cannot give meaning to the world, they cannot take risks and have decision-making responses, they cannot commit themselves, they cannot construct nor transform life because they are ahistorical. And finally, they cannot animalize or de-animalize themselves as humans can do, in the sense of humanize or dehumanize themselves. Humans can always be more human, in a sense, where we have these values and ideals installed to be greater human, and also we can dehumanize ourselves by, I don't know, crimes or in that sense, animals cannot do that, according to Freire, in their own way, in their analogy of animalization or de-animalization. And that's why there he says, as animal-like in the forest as in the zoo. And finally, human beings, unlike animals, not only live, but exist. That is, they do not only survive, but are also historically becoming. In this way, non-human life in the Pedagogy of the Oppressed primarily appears as an object of comparison to the human. The problem with this comparison can be formulated in the following simple question: why does the representation of human self-realization generally needs comparison with other living beings? Namely, the comparison often additionally impoverishes insight into the possibilities of animal self-realization. This is morally relevant because by narrowing insight into animal self-realization, one can easily overlook some of its elements that should be respected by moral agents. The thesis that animals are themselves, in the same sense, being captivated or not, independently now of the issue of suffering that may be caused or thwarted by captivation, is exactly one of the examples for the mentioned narrowing, which is at the same time narrowing of one's moral reflection. Thus, despite the attribution of vitality and incompleteness to the animal, which not many authors of his time or style do, and Freire does it, well, despite that, particular Freire's qualifications can be helpful in the temptation to approach the animal oppressively. Although his analysis of human possibilities is done in a way that should not cause much controversy, putting an animal on the other end of binary opposition clearly misses the specific richness that life has in all of its stages, levels, or whatever we like to call it, and cannot simply be reduced to survival. However, already the Pedagogy of the Oppressed can shed a different light on these issues. Here, Freire repeatedly invokes Erich Fromm, especially with regard to the problem of the transformation of the oppressed into inanimate things for the purpose of satisfying the oppressor's desire for possession. Where Freire quotes him, Fromm directly says that the essence of the sadistic urge is not only the pleasure of complete domination over another person, but also over another animate creature, and that the sadist's goal is to turn the living into the inanimate through complete control. The banking system of education, that is traditional one, as we can call it, where students merely memorizes content by teachers' commands, kills creativity by supervision, involves the mechanistic and static understanding of consciousness, and forms students as those who need to adapt to reality. Therefore, this system cannot enable the development of biophilia, but only necrophilia. That is directly said. Well, love of the inanimate, mechanical, and not the love of the growth as a quality of life. In another quoting of Fromm on this issue, every living being is again clearly placed in the same category. A necrophilic person cannot associate with anything if they do not possess it, be it a human or a flower. The supervision required for this possessive stance kills a life. The description of the constellation which Frey represents by quoting from should rather go in the direction of finding reasons for solidarity, that is, striving to cultivate the vitality of all living beings in their own forms. Perhaps a more careful preservation of the childlike sensibility can encourage such implications. Children's comparisons, which many parents have encountered and often reacted to wrongly, are more in the favor than at the expense of animals. For instance, if pig feels pain, we should not kill it, eat it, etc. Not taking animals seriously in adults can at least partially be described as a result of the repression of childish curiosity, delight in questioning, and the need to bring about change in our relationship toward them. However, Freire could have learned this from his own theory. For example, at one point he argues that children's laughter is, I quote, the expression of the joy of living, the will to do things, to transform the world, end of quote. And grown-ups, their life needs to cultivate its own childhood. I quote again, to the extent that it supplies vitality of life, end of quote. Therefore, according to Walter Omar Cohen, Freire was not so devoted to the education of children simply because he wanted to educate childlike persons, childlike people. This is confirmed by the fact that he raised a properly childlike view to the level of the greatest complement to revolution. Well, revolutionary and educative practice do not differ so much in Freire's work, so this is relevant in the educational sense also. Here we are talking about Nicaraguan revolution, and even today you have in Managua, the capital of Nicaragua, you have Universidad Paulo Freire, University Paulo Freire, of course. Here Freire says in his dialogue with Antonio Fondes that Nicaraguan revolution seemed to me to be a revolution in its infancy. In its infancy, not in the sense that it was newly arrived, but by the evidence it was giving of its curiosity, its restlessness, its delight in questioning, its not being afraid to dream, its desire to grow, to be creative, and to bring about change. End of quote. One could even say, as Cohen says, that the more childish the revolution, the more revolutionary and educative it is, as well as that the best educator is a childish one. The imperative to become a child certainly doesn't exclude the imperative to preserve childhood in children themselves. It is needed because childish development can cease on behalf of adult ossification as early as childhood. After all, this ossification is often a goal of educational institutions, aiming at what Freire explains as turning the constant growth into an accomplished growth. The goal of growth being ungrowth. This is why true educators in many cases find themselves in the situation where they need to create a need for questioning in their students and not to keep and cultivate that need. Freire's early life, on the other hand, can be indicative of the way in which certain challenges which are crucial for childlike, where we can find crucial childlike elements for education, can arise very early from other sources, from a reality that needs to be changed in order to evade the mentioned ossification. Since early childhood, Freire has developed intense intimacy with nature, starting with the trees around his house in which he grew up, the trees that seemed to him like people, as he says in letters to Christina. The backyard of the house, full of trees and birds that inhabited them, as he writes in the Pedagogy of the Heart, formed his first world and constituted a point of reference that constituted him. As Cohen explains, Freire's attitude toward nature was partially changed by his family's getting into economic troubles during his childhood, being at the same time forced to prematurely become an adult. Intimacy with nature was increasingly suppressed by the need to find sustenance for life. This doesn't mean that this intimacy completely subsided. This especially became obvious in the last years of his life. He then speaks of the need to, I quote, fight for more fundamental ethical principles, such as respect for the life of human beings, the life of other animals, end of quote, etc. He also claims that every life, I'm here talking about the book Pedagogia da Indignação, which is Pedagogy of Indignation. You can find it, I hope. So this is his last book, really, which was published after he died. Okay. He also claims that every life has, I quote, at least a minimal presence of freedom, end of quote, and even that there cannot be a revolutionary discourse that negates life. A cheeky reader could prescribe this greater openness for ethical and ontological appreciation of life to the common feature of elderly people who, in a sense, naturally become childish. However, in this case, this qualification would not be wrong, would not be pejorative. Freire on many occasions emphasized his striving for the preservation of child in himself. As he said, the one he was and the one he couldn't be, without which one cannot be a philosopher. It is, he also says, I quote, this child who leads me to love life so much, end of quote. In this sense, where life is, I quote, understood in the full broadness of the concept, rather than just a human life, end of quote, the synthesis of childlikeness as the indispensable condition of education and childlike sensibility towards living beings is in no sense artificial or forcibly established. It could be said that even if a child could not completely survive in Freire, there is an unquestionable imperative in his work for remaining a child, in the sense of the above-mentioned childlike features, in order to constantly become human. At the very least, children in this sense can provide other adults with valuable first-hand knowledge of gaining knowledge. This includes the need for questioning and thus transformation, but also rich sensibility toward life, which can rightly be named bioethical. This sensibility is crucial for putting the current practices toward non-human living beings into question. One of its features being receptivity, sensibility allows us to be open to various aspects of reality. Bioethical sensibility allows us not only to be interested in the richness of non-human living beings' self-realization, but also to perceive more situations as problems. Sensibility, in that sense, submits material to critical thinking. In the paper, Pedagogy, the missing chapter of the Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Greg William Misiaczek, I think it's Polish name, I couldn't do that, I couldn't pronounce it right, and Carlos Alberto Torres, here's one wonderful language where you can express it rightly, refer to Freire's words from a conversation the latter had with Torres and Gadotti, in which Freire, I quote, insisted on the need of a planetary citizenship and eco-pedagogy as a model to defend the planet, a most oppressed entity, in his words, end of quote. Moreover, I quote, the essence of eco-pedagogy was the subject in which he stated was the book's missing chapter and was to be the topic of his next book, which unfortunately was not completed because of his death in 1997, end of quote. Perhaps it was the very children's bioethical sensibility missing to write the missing chapter of the Pedagogy of the Oppressed more comprehensively. And now I don't know if I have any more time. I'll just shortly skip to the topic of utopia, which is here understood more in this Bloch's or Mannheim's idea, and not utopia as a passive utopia of Plato or other classics of Thomas More and similar. Well, for Freire, utopia is not merely idealistic nor impractical. He understands something that Bloch calls concrete utopia, where you should know the conditions in which you are, but not that doesn't mean that those conditions are determinations, but something that should be known in order to overcome it. And he defines utopia as the constant changing of the world and the overcoming of injustice. So some picture of utopia with, whose content is over and finished doesn't count for Freire. And in this sense, we have all these childish features that can skip in here. Well, everything that we are talking about utopian pedagogy needs these childish features of which Freire is talking about. Future for him is not repetition of the present, nor it is predetermined. Predetermined we can also read in this sense that we shouldn't have the idea of the future, finished picture of the future, because in that sense we don't have what Bloch was said, we don't have real future. I don't know how to translate it in English, but we only have not real future, because this is not future because this picture is already existing in someone's head. We need real future where we don't have those content of the utopia already made. And revolutionary utopia tends to, for Freire, biophilia. He directly says this, and not necrophilia, to be dynamic, not passive, to understand love as liberation, not as possessiveness. Here we all have from once again. And that revolutionary utopia tends to the emotion of life, not to cold abstractions. And just in order to understand the way in which he takes all these ideas together, maybe it would be instructive to give this quote from his dialogue with Ira Shore. He quotes Cabral, where he says, how poor is the revolution that doesn't dream. We can just switch this revolution with education for Freire in many cases. And Freire says, this is imagination. This is the possibility to go beyond tomorrow without being naively idealistic. This is utopianism as a dialectical relationship between denouncing the present and announcing the future, to anticipate tomorrow by dreaming today. The question is, as Cabral said, is the dream a possible one or not? If it is less possible, the question for us is how to make it more possible. And here, when we are thinking about possibilities in which we are, and if we need this concrete utopia, which is looking for some concrete elements in our reality which we should know about, well, it doesn't mean that we are limiting ourselves on the framework in which we are, but it means that we should think out of the box, and that this is best explained by this idea that we should find for possibilities, and if there are less possibilities, we should think about how to make possibilities. Freire was a guy who always told something like, if you want to follow me, then you should not follow me, in a sense. You should always reinvent me, in a sense. And I think that following what was Reinhard talking in her presentation and my different approach, we can find much place for reinventing Freire in this way of animal ethics. Maybe on some places we don't even need to reinvent him. We already have something which is important for our topics here. Just maybe. I am looking forward for your questions. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Josip. This is really a wonderful supplement to our Freire research. I already wrote down all the titles of the books
sorry, maybe should I have in this presentation, just a second, I have literature references. So I will just show it here. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, I have also these links for pictures that I used, but for you more importantly will be maybe this. When you have, I can send my presentation, and also you can see it maybe afterwards if you have record. Well, you will have the record of this.
Yes, I really think it's very important what you are doing, because usually it's true that Freire is just presented, because his Pedagogy of the Oppressed was so influential that it just, and because he wrote so many books, I think it's more than 30 or something that he wrote, this Pedagogy of the Oppressed just overshadowed everything. And we know Freire, we only read that book, right? And that's why, even Corman, for instance, Rana will know, or Acampora, or all those people that are actually using Freire, just I have the impression that we really don't know this other part of Freire, that we stopped reading. Freire started and stopped with his Pedagogy of the Oppressed. So I really think this is a very, very valuable thing that you presented to us. Okay, comments. Other comments, questions? Reingard?
Thank you very much, Josip. Wonderful presentation, very inspiring. I agree. I also think there is much more in Freire than meets the eye on the surface, and than what has been discussed in the literature so far. I think we can also use some concepts in Freire to mirror back to critical animal pedagogy. Because I think sometimes in critical animal pedagogy, we actually use a banking model to sort of tell the stupid students how to have a critical worldview and what the solution would be. I think we could do with more participative learning and sharing in this area. So yes, many more. I think it would be worth developing a whole research area to be more, have come to more differentiated discussions of Freire. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. Well, I think that there are a lot of things that we can use from Freire here, and I agree. Many authors just take Pedagogy of the Oppressed and think that's all for Freire, well, that is main work, but it's one of his, it's among earliest works, not really earliest, but one of the early works. So one should also take into account late Freire. He lived long enough to have, and he really liked to write much, and he also many times takes the same topics again and again, revisited them. So but it's kind of hard task, because you should read like 30 or more books of his. But I wanted to comment that some more places are where we can take Freire into account here. I will well, the paper on this similar topic I was talking about here should be published like at the maybe end of the year or at the beginning of the next year. So I'll send it to you, because I took some other ideas here which we should use. That is his educational approach, his educational practice he took. It will be interested to have it in these topics with like workers on industrial farms, slaughterhouses, etc. To have this problem posing education, which he advocates with them, of course, and in that way we shouldn't have this banking concept of education. And I think you're right in this comment that we are many times we are approaching in this way, thinking that we are critical in our approach, but we are really not.
Thank you.
Or sorry, if we take environmental issues, we can have people who directly suffer from their I don't know, climate change, because you have people who think that who doesn't believe in climate change in a sense, and they are suffering from it. And we have, as well as we have oppressed people in this old school sense, in which people are think that this is natural way of in which world functions. So in this environmental and animal ethics issues, we have, I think, many places where we can use Freire in.
So, Josip, you mentioned Freire's approach of education for like slaughterhouse workers. Could you explain this a little bit more, because this sounds fascinating?
Yeah, I thought it would be fascinating for you because you are dealing with this. Well, I just told wild idea, but I think that you can have it because they are also oppressed in that sense. They are in some very ugly position, because they are in a kind oppressors of animals, of course, because they are killing them, etc. But on the other hand, they are really oppressed as those who are oppressed in a society, just starting from the idea that they have little wages, minimum wages, etc., and working conditions. But on the other hand, what I try to say is that they are really suffering from the work they do, and this experience they have from this suffering should be really informative, not only in this way, teacher or instructor or whatever you like to call this cultural circle, which you could do with those workers. Those workers can inform teachers in this sense of something that they don't know. That is Freire's idea that well, teachers and students should be existing. It's okay, but we should always be at the same time, teachers should at the same time always be a student, as well as students can at the same time always be teachers, because they have this experiential knowledge which teacher doesn't, and teacher should let them know that. In that sense, we can find ways in which we should be or not the oppressors or the oppressed in that situation, because Tomasz was talking in Split on these days of animal ethics. He was the days of animal studies, as we call them in English. He was talking about pedagogy for the oppressors. Here we can have pedagogy for the oppressors and the oppressed at the same time. Well, Tomasz and Reinhard had this together, this presentation, but Tomasz was talking. So so that's just the starting point where we can develop things more. So if you have, Tomasz, some comments on this, I will be happy to hear them.
Yes, I think we have to develop this further. If you're mentioning this in your paper, just don't forget to send us your paper, because it will be very useful. And I can see us writing a book on Freire and critical animal pedagogy soon in the future. I think this is now really maturing, this research, because I think we have some important points to say. You have a very important point to say, that stop reading early Freire when it comes to animal ethics education and start reading later Freire. And also this idea of problem posing education. Well, I'll just please, yeah, it's just wonderful. We will have to say many more things about this. Anybody else?
Can I also mention just one thing, if no one has any questions? We have one more interesting topic from the early Freire, let's say, but it's eternal Freire and early and late, is this idea that oppressed have only one illustration of what it means to be human. For them, to be human is to be oppressor. So when they cannot, when they are in human societies on the bottom, they are most oppressed, maybe people, well, they can be proper humans when they are oppressing animals. That is maybe also one point which can be further explored. I mentioned all this in short in the paper, but there is much place, much well, we can investigate it further. Thank you very much. Sorry for my long speech. I'm not just sorry. I'm now talking like Zizek 3 hours. Sorry for me interrupting and then again. Well, so on. Okay, sorry.
Well, we were a bit confused by this idea of love in Freire, which is also picked up by many other critical pedagogues. Also, Kinchelo talks about this love, do you have any, because for us it seems to be so vague, this idea of love, you know? Could you maybe say something more about this? If you know anything in greater detail?
Well, that was not really my topic. In a sense, we can say that I don't like to use love in my papers because I'm maybe too modernist in a sense. So I like this old categories, etc. Not in every aspect, of course. But love is problematic because no one, when he is talking about love, doesn't define love. That is a problem. And Freire, I don't know, he maybe defines it. I cannot now remember is there any like definition of love, but he tries to show what love should be, in a sense that it is not possessiveness, it is letting one to be free, in a sense. So we can draw some definition of Freire's idea of love based on his work. And in the other way, he is talking, well, I can't remember it exactly, but he is talking that we should like build a world in which it would be easier to love. Well, I think that I like to think in ethics in terms of self-realization. That is one term in which I would like to develop some ethical theory. And I think that love isn't maybe our duty, but as it is to love someone, maybe we can love everybody, we can love just a certain amount of people, animals, or whatever we should or would like. But to love or to be loved, as it is said, is part of our self-realization. And we should build a world in which we can more easily self-realize, in a sense. And love is a part of this self-realization, and not something as maybe duty. So in this sense, I think that Freire doesn't think much different than me here, but that is the topic to be investigated.
Okay, thank you. Yes, it is useful to know that, because we were thinking that it also comes from his theology of liberation, you know, because for Southern America, this idea of revolution and Christianity actually goes hand in hand, unlike as in our Eastern European countries where it's strictly divided. So, yeah.
Yeah, you are right. You're right. There we should also look for this. Love is, well, virtue, maybe the greatest Christian virtue. So in this sense, well, yes.
Mm-hmm. So we have a couple of more minutes if anybody wants to add something, a question, a comment. Marietka.
Maybe this is not really connected with this talking, but as we thinking about this critical animal pedagogy, I would love to know how would you address the slaughtering pigs at the countryside as a part of tradition on different levels of education? Is it any idea how to address this very important, I would say, in our country, in Slovenia, Croatia, I think, still existing?
Yeah, the koline, as we called it, right? Yeah, which is in Slovenia protected as a non-material cultural heritage.
It's a tradition, yes, it's a heritage.
Is it really under UNESCO protected? Or?
No.
Okay.
National.
Well, at least that
I hope not, but it's still very much existing tradition. And also we have 2 books recently written about this Colline from a very famous ethnologist, Janez Bogataj, which is quite interesting and appalling at the same time.
We have also this Colline in Croatian.
yeah.
It is the same tradition. But
I'm interested how to address this kind of in the levels, different levels of education. Can we actually find a way how to address this kind of, because it's very connected to people, and it's not considering as a appalling thing in a countryside still.
It's even praised as being much better than industrial slaughter. It's offered as an alternative, as an acceptable alternative.
Yeah, because it's ritualization is inside of this.
I know that Rana also worked on emotions and tradition influencing our worldviews. Maybe Rana, do you have any thoughts on this? But you also raise your hand.
Just thinking about Marietka's inspiring question. Yeah, I think that is a very hard question, because Tomasz and I recently talked about this, how strong this discourse is, and how romanticized this is being. And it's, I think it fits well in any modernization theory where people try to turn back to traditions, searching for something good in our lives and in society.
But this tradition is actually a negative tradition. I'm calling this a negative tradition, and it should be, I would say, reformed in a way, and because the final result of this tradition is death and suffering of animal. Of course, it's not in that much extent that is in industrial slaughtering, but still, I'm researching now this, but I'm not really in this some kind of educational theory. So that was my interesting how to actually express this kind of negative tradition, and to find a way how to find some kind of solution to present students that this is not a positive tradition, actually. Even if this is only one individual in this kind of slaughtering. Not a million, not a billion, but it's one, but still it's one animal, it's one person, actually.
But we can, sorry.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think we can also, not in the same level, because we are not eating these animals, but comparing with bullfightings in Spain. It's also a very big national tradition. And there were several petitions nationwide, and also on the level of European Union. And of course, European Union is founding these all European heritages. So it's a very complex, about comparing traditions, heritage, with morals, with ethics, what is right and what is wrong in doing so. Also, I think, at least I hope that we progress in, as a conscious, rational human beings. So I think it's very important, like you said, that we present students the whole picture in what is wrong or right with such traditions, because not all traditions are wrong. But it's wrong, I mean, from ethical point of view, because it's evident you hurt somebody, that animal, that being, that person is suffering, at the end is also killed, and so on. So for I think, like I see it in Spain and also in European Union about bullfightings, it is now becoming also on the transnational level this concern about not to kill bulls, because we know in which way they are killed now. We know that they are, I don't know, 8 hours blind practically in the dark. So when they go out in this arena, they don't see for a time. You know, they don't see, they are scared. And so these all things are coming out, and people are thinking about it, because they're really outrageous what's going on with the animals. So they made also an experiment, putting, I don't know, 50 people inside the arena, and then they opened the cage of the bull, and he was going out, and they were dressed in red and so on. So, you know, it was an arena for a beast, for a bull to be aggressive with all these people inside, and the bull didn't do anything, but really anything, to neither one person that was standing. He was going between. He was really angry, but he didn't attack or something like this. You know, so with this graphics, with these videos, with education, we how you say, people are seeing all this, and they start to thinking. And now I think that regarding bullfighting, we are in the level that there are so much people signed to end this practice. Also in Spain, where it's national heritage and all Europeans, that when the level of human conscience and morality reaches a top of something, with all the knowledge we have about this specific tradition, then the change can come. And I don't know how this in education, how you present, but for sure is something that can be overpassed, because it's barbaric, and everybody already knows that. And I think that, but really think that we should be very courageous, you know, teachers, philosophers, lawyers, very courageous, not be a political, how you say, correct, politically correct, but you know, to be courageous, to speak and to do what is right. And then that it's the only way that things can change, not that slowly, but more quickly. And it's the same in the law and philosophy and education. We have to be courageous, because some things are really immoral, unethical, barbaric, that it's really hard to live, and, like Josip said, to love in such a world.
Thank you very much for this. I only see one problem, that's the bullfighting is not, bull is not a food.
Yeah.
Where the pig is a food. But it's, of course, it has to be addressed that it's not necessary to eat this pig. Of course.
Mhm.
But this kind of, you see, this tradition is so much connected to some symbolism, to some past traditional values and everything. So it's very persistent in a daily life. So it's connected to gathering. Some Norwegian ethnologists called this that the pigs are a part of family, but in the end they are part of some kind of cannibalism, because you are part of the family, and now this part of the family was you eat that part of the family. So it's very complicated, and I hope we will have this courage, you said, and we will be persistent in our actually wanting to connect this kind of life, and to see that that every tradition is not positive, and some tradition has to be transformed. I also thinking about that the people should see the pig in person, to be with him, to see how he is some kind of individual, having everything. So this is, I think it's much important also in educational process to establish that this is a person, that is an individualist.
I would like if Tomasz let me just add a very short comment. Yes, indeed, it's a completely different question, because we are eating pigs, but therefore should be also a very different approach to the problem. And if I remember one of the talks of Mark Rowlands, who is very much known as animal ethicist, he approached this problem regarding health. So in education, it is also possible to approach the slaughters and also these traditions and heritages and everything regarding animal killing, also with antibiotics. With antibiotics, because he said that he was that was very difficult for his son to get antibiotics because he was ill and things like this, and because if you consume too much antibiotics, then we resist and it's not good. So they don't want to give you just run away the antibiotics if you're ill. But on the other hand, in the farm intensive industry, they give antibiotics as prevention. So not because they are ill, but because of the prevention, and animals are already, I mean, the meat and everything full of antibiotics. So he said that it's also regarding environmental problems and climate change, and also ethics and morality of killing other beings, that we should implement a principle of precaution, so that this principle is now spreading also in law, in a constitutional law in Finland, but it's a principle that is that in small words that you think about if you want to consume meat, for example, because you know that meat is from animals that are full of antibiotics, that they are suffering, that the meat maybe it's not that healthy because of all these energy is put inside because of not being an animal in a very good condition. So we have to be precautious in consuming, and very much thinking about what we are doing, also from moral point of view, and also in law. Okay, they are starting, so I don't know the whole picture, but Finnish lawyers made a proposal about the change of Finnish constitution, and one of the principles, there I don't know, 4 or 5 principles, is also one principle of precaution, that because a being is a moral being, a moral agent in this world, as animal is, then we have really to think about how we are treating them. So if now we put in the heritage and in these traditions, the word tradition means something that is going on for a long period of time, but times are changing. Times are changing, and I don't know, maybe our grandfathers consumed meat twice a month, and these animals were really healthy. I mean, they were outside and things like this. And these animals right now, there are a lot of videos, they are not. So tradition is really something that I think that you keep it if it's a positive one for the whole world, and health and joy and love, not in that like it's now. I mean, I was very long, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Rana raised her hand.
Thank you, Priscilla, for your thoughts. I agree. I think what Marietka is proposing would also be a good field for work for Branislava, to deconstruct discourses about rural life by the way of Freudian demystification of realities. We just had a case here in and around Innsbruck discussing a photographer who took pictures of rural life during the 1940s. And it's only now, 80 years later, that we are starting to discuss how these pictures were suffused with Nazi ideology. So these things just take a long time, I think.
I agree. We have also one tradition, which was bird shooting or bird hunting. And then it was actually, the people realized that this is really not a good tradition to maintain, since they realized that the birds are very useful, but this is coming from usefulness. So, so one reason is also like this, but we should have more ethical reason to do this kind of thinking about.
Yeah, I also think this is I would also like to engage with this Marietka's challenge. It's a big challenge. I think that what critical animal pedagogy would say at the beginning is just start raising questions. Start raising questions about how come the cries of the pig are normalized. How come that you have this bond with an animal, and then all of a sudden you kill it and eat it and so on. Just raising questions is the first step. I think it's problematizing the whole thing, and the other thing is maybe referring back to Gene Myers. I think that the Colina, I think a really good point how children are being taught to disregard their, I would say, natural impulse, which is just run away. I know so many people, because Koline, on the other hand, are not a pleasant memory for many, or they're a mixed memory. Everybody remembers cries of pigs. You know, I come from a village. I also have close contact, of course, with people there, and I remember those cries. You know, when I would hear them, I would just it would ruin my day. And I'm sure not the only one. You know, I know that I know other children that were hiding when it was time to do the thing. So I think that the potential is there, and that that actually Koline, in a way, critical animal pedagogy would say that Koline there has to be a lot of effort to normalize this ritual, actually. And if we start asking questions about this normalization of ritual, then maybe perception slowly can change. Branislava, maybe do you have anything to add?
Yes, I think I agree with Marietka that it's really strong cultural symbolism in this practice. And yes, I think we should, and this is maybe the hardest part, yes, to deconstruct, yes, this symbolic system, yes. And yes, maybe this is, maybe we should demonstrate how the symbols are in a way abstract, but in a way they have real consequences on real lives. And yes, maybe this is the thing we should do to show this connection with symbols and how they influence the lives of yes, the lives.
Anybody else?
Yes.
Well, maybe because we have Marietka with us, maybe this is also a nice opportunity to wrap up our today's workshop. And Marietka, maybe you can tell a word or two about the upcoming conference that you are organizing in autumn next year, if you wish, maybe.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. Well, we are organizing the conference Thinking Animals because it's coming from our project we held in our institute. Also, Thinking Animals is the title. And we have quite a different direction of, I would say, approaching to research of animals in different way. So we have animals mythologically looking, of course, critical animal studies, of course, inside. Then we have also our partner is also the people from some researchers from Biotechnical University, and the center of this is the brown bear. Also, we would like to address how this brown bear is also very important, and how these collisions are with bears and humans, as well as different kind of topics. So if somebody is interested in this, the conference will take place in Ljubljana from 16th of October to 19th of October in the Research Center of Slovenian Academy of Sciences and Arts. And if somebody is particularly interesting, I can send it also a little bit more about the conference.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will definitely be there. I hope other people will join as well. Dear everybody, thanks a lot for your contributions, to all the speakers and to everybody else that actively participated. We are almost half an hour over time, which is a very good sign, I think. that the issues are pressing and worth addressing, which also rhymes. But I will try to upload the presentations, the PowerPoints to the website of our workshop. So please, Branislava, Rana, and Josip, try sending me those to my email. Also, this video will probably be posted on YouTube, so you will be able to share the link if anybody will be interested in listening and also watching us. Again, many thanks to everybody, also to our dean that took time today and addressed all of us at the beginning, and hope to see you soon.
Thanks.
Yes,
Bye-bye.
thank you, Tomasz, for organizing this inspiring.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That was wonderful.
So
Thanks
it
for
was wonderful.
talking.
Thank you to
Thank
all
you.
of you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.